Okay, hello, welcome to this week's SNES Divination. This week it's on Tuesday. I'm not sure why. Anyway, this is an interesting reading, I think, because, look, there is the main theme, I think, is that Sonic Blast Man 2 serves as a good example of what I'm trying to say. There is a city, and there is a light rising, sort of enveloping the city. Now, this occurs in different ways, I think, or can be read in different ways. For instance, here we have the sort of field of dead, and the Mortal Kombat logo is shining. It's like a light is blasting out from the center of the image, or like an explosion of light, right? This happens in War 3010, The Revolution, in a way that the logo is also kind of like an explosion of light. And of course, the sun itself is present in the image. So, yeah, that's kind of like an initial kind of thing. Then Bonkers, Disney's Bonkers. It's of course impossible to tell whether this is a sunset or a sunrise. At least I can't tell. But it's definitely light enveloping the scene. It highlights the theme of light. It's not a blue sky, right? It's a red, yellow sky. So light is enveloping the city in the same way that light was enveloping the city here. Okay, so we got that out of the way. Then, of course, the Wheel of Fortune. Now, the Wheel of Fortune, I think, resonates very strongly with all of these themes because it is in itself a mandala. So if here we are seeing mandalas of light emanating from a central point, then the Wheel of Fortune is a good image for that. And of course, furthermore, it is an image that already has a tarot equivalent. So in its tarot meaning, as far as I know, it has to do with the cycles, sort of different kinds of cycles in life, in the universe as a whole, or something like that, and specifically the beginning of a new cycle. So I feel as if perhaps we could read this conjunction of images as having to do with the beginning of a new cycle, and this rising light is somehow playing an important role in this beginning of this new cycle. Now, another recurring image is that of the blue man. Sonic Blast Man 2 is a blue man. The Rise of the Robots, we have this blue person. Mega Man is obviously a famous blue man. And Disney's Bonkers is a blue man in that he is dressed in a blue police uniform. Okay, so, blue men. What to make of this? I find another kind of recurring, or sort of something that connects at least these three images together, which is their roboticness. Rise of the Robots already tells us in the title that this guy is a robot. Mega Man, I think, he kind of highlights a certain robotic quality in his appearance, right? It's as if he is made of metal, despite it being a suit or whatever. It's, his body is shiny and metallic. And the same goes for this Sonic Blast Man guy. He seems fairly kind of robotic in that he's wearing these futuristic glasses, and he's dressed in an appearance that mimics a non-human kind of robotic appearance, you could say. And furthermore, he has this sort of like clock on his chest, as if he were, he's full of gadgets, sort of made of little clockwork kind of gadgets. How the policeman ties into this, I am unsure, although my hunch is that policeman here stands for something like authority, and therefore like the structures of bureaucracy and the sort of Apollo-like structures that the Dionysian free-flowing chaos is contained by. So a more Saturnian kind of thing, which of course would resonate nicely with the clock on this guy's chest. Okay, so these guys are robots. Now, I am going to go a little more sort of free flow here and interpret what I think that means. I see the robot here as being something robotic, meaning something automatic and clockworky. And in a psychological context, I would say that that would refer to a habit, something that occurs unconsciously, right? It occurs like clockwork. It doesn't require you to maneuver it consciously. It's something that operates out of its own accord, right? And that therefore the operation, the life of this robot didn't depend on your egoic consciousness. It operates on its own automatically, right? So any kind of living content in the unconscious psyche. So of course this gives a different meaning to the word the rise of the robots. It suggests that the automatic unconscious habits, complexes, whatever they may be in the unconscious, are rising, which of course is the eternal theme of these SNES divinations, but it seems to get different nuances with each reading. So anyway, the thing with this then is that it allows us to combine the image of the rising light and the rising robot, in the sense that if the light is usually a good symbol for awareness, right, becoming enlightened and so on, then an explosion of light is like an explosion of sort of awareness spreading its limits further than its normal limits. So if its limits were usually here, now it is spreading its limits. What does that mean? Is that usually awareness would be contained in like the ego, like the body or whatever. And yet it is now spreading beyond. What this means for this reading, furthermore, is that in past readings, I used to get this sense of which characters in the box art represented the ego. And very often it was very clear to me that, you know, this guy's the ego, this guy's the ego. In a lot of the past readings, the ego was the hero. Then slowly we started getting more and more images of the ego descending down into the underworld and submitting or surrendering to the depths. This week, that act of surrendering seems to have taken its effect, because I can't identify the ego with any of these characters, and this had never happened before. Like, I most certainly don't identify it with the hero characters. I don't feel the ego to be this guy, or I don't feel the ego to be this guy, or Mega Man. I do get a slight ego vibe, like from her, and from this robot person, and from the dog, for example, but it's not a complete feeling. But of course, it already gives a kind of a tendency, which is that it seems as if the closer we get to the completely non-egoic characters, such as the villains or the fringe characters that are clearly not the protagonist, that's where I get more of a strong ego sense. So this also goes together with the idea of the rise of the robots. That somehow it's as if maybe the Just need to give the letter I in I am or whatever. This I, this sense of being or of identification is spreading further, right? The light is expanding so that maybe now the identification, we are identifying with things that maybe we wouldn't have identified with before, which again, in psychological terms, you could say is some sort of an integration of the projected shadow or something like that, of the projected any kind of projected archetype, that all the people that before we would have said, that's not me, that's not I, now we're like, I identify with this dog. I can see where this dog is coming from. You know, I can understand and stand in this dog's shoes, so to speak. So I think there is something about that going on, however we want to read it. So, yes, so light is rising from the skulls and so on, from the dead, the unconscious in some way. And I want to focus, let's see, on a second on the Baha thing, because I haven't looked at this one. Off-road. I get a feeling in this box art that also kind of resonates something else. Is we get these two arrows here, which signal that this car is going in this direction. It's going outside of the frame of the game. A lot of the characters are going out of the frame. This guy is going out of the frame. He's running out. This guy is flying over here. Mega Man is flying over here. And these spaceships are, well, they're actually just flying towards each other. But I get the feeling that off-road kind of signals this. It's off the beaten track. If the beaten track is the ego, it's the known track, the track that was already structured before. Now we're walking down. The path is expanding, basically, right? It's the theme of expansion again, that all of the off-road terrain that we would have never driven through is now available for driving through. The sense of self is spreading off-road in that sense. And looking at War 3010, another thing I wanted to comment on is the fact that the game is called The Revolution. Now, revolution, as far as I can tell, is etymologically linked to like revolving, right? Something that spins around. So it's the changing of the guard, right? The old, it spins around and it revolves, and it is changed by something new, which of course is kind of what the Wheel of Fortune is about, right? A new cycle starting, a revolution in some sense. Another interesting thing I noticed that, as I said, I don't identify the ego in like the heroic characters, but I do identify it in like the dog and these villains that are chasing Mega Man, and in this specific space craft. I don't know why. This is very irrational. I feel as if this spacecraft, I don't think this spacecraft should be shot. It's as if I am rooting for this one, or not even rooting. It's as if I feel whatever kind of empathy or pain I feel in this image, I feel in identification with this spaceship in specific. I don't know why. The only explanation I can think is that it's on the left side of the image, as were the dog and the villain in Mega Man. Again, in this image, for some reason, this is the closest I personally identify to an ego image. It's as if, the off-road car is being signaled by these arrows to go in this direction, which is the left of the image. And the left of the image seems to be the way that will lead it off the road. It's as if the element that the ego isn't accustomed to identifying with, the dog, the villain, is on the left of the image. As if the escape route is the shadow. It's as if the shadow is the pathway through which the light of consciousness expands. It expands through the shadow. This makes sense in that an expansion of consciousness would imply, or sort of I identification, which maybe is what consciousness is, would imply that the I would have to spread towards the shadow, towards everything that the ego doesn't allow the I to spread towards. So the shadow is the gateway through which awareness expansion occurs, or something like that. And then that this whole image is kind of summarized by the Wheel of Fortune, by the beginning of a new phase, which of course makes sense, again, from a slightly more down-to-earth psychological point of view, in that the robots, or the habits in your psyche, everything that was habitual in your life, was the life cycle that you were in, right? At whatever stage in your life you're in, the recurring habits you're in go round and round, and they define your life. If one of these habits can be not transcended, but if these habits rise to consciousness and stop being so habitual, or the awareness rising to them makes the habits change because they had been operating at an unconscious level, then your life enters into a new place. A place that is defined by a new set of habits, a new set of structures that you live within. So the rising of the robots is the beginning of a new cycle, right? I mean, the word cycle already implies it, right? It's the something that had been spinning round now enters into a new gear, into a new variety of spin, something that had been repetitive and automatic. Well, I hope that's enough. Thanks as usual for watching, and yeah, I will see you next week. Goodbye.